newest member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, David Ortiz. Now, Andrew, I was a little surprised that anyone reached the 75% threshold based on the controversy surrounding this year's ballot. I had a feeling Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens weren't going to make the cut, even though I personally believe they should be in. However, I did see Ortiz making it in eventually, not in the first year, and we'll get into that a little more, but definitely in his second year and maybe after that. I definitely saw him as a Hall of Famer, but not his first year.
Yeah, it's interesting with Ortiz because you obviously have the positive tests back in 2003. That was important in 2009. So, there's some speculation with that, whether he should be in when you don't let guys like Bonds, Clemens, A-Rod, Manny in. But obviously, Ortiz had the resume. 20 seasons, first 6 with the Twins, last 14 with the Red Sox, 10 All-Star games, World Series MVP, ALCS MVP, over 500 home runs, 931 career OPS. I mean, the guy, he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but he obviously did not get more than, what did he get, 70% because of, PDs.
Absolutely, Andrew. Ortiz surely has numbers to back his Hall of Fame case. He was a 10-time All-Star, 7-time Silver Slugger. He was a winner of 3 different World Series back in 2004, 2007, and 2013, all of which came with the Red Sox. And he also won the ALCS MVP back in 2004, and he was the World Series MVP in 2013. He was a career 286 hitter, and he tallied 2,471 hits to go along with 541 career home runs, 1,768 RBIs. He had, like you said, Andrew, a very impressive career, 931 OPS. And the reason for this skepticism, Andrew, as you said, there was a positive test back in 2003 that surfaced in 2009. But the controversy with Ortiz is not as immense as it is with Clemens and Bonds and Sosa and Rodriguez. We can keep going because that era of baseball is now up on the ballot for Cooperstown. So regardless of everything that's surrounding Ortiz, like we said, with the PEDs, he's one of, if not the greatest DH of all time. And Cooperstown is definitely where he belongs in my opinion.
And I mean, one of the things was like Big Papi, he definitely built this nice guy image around him. And as we know, they like to vote for guys they like. Bonds, Clemens.
Yeah, they like to vote for guys that give back to the community. Ortiz is definitely doing that.
Yeah, it's basically, as I would describe it, a popularity contest. Hall of Fame voting. I don't really.
Yeah, you could say that. You could definitely say that. But when someone is trying to mend their image, that's going to give them some more votes. And Ortiz is definitely doing that. So Ortiz received 77.3% of the vote. And that is definitely more than enough to get enshrinement into Cooperstown. That's 2.3% higher than the 75% threshold that you do need to get inducted. Now, alongside Ortiz, there were 6 other inductees that came on 2 separate ballots. Andrew, who were those 6 other inductees?
So we had 6 other guys from the today's game ballot. Tony Oliva, who's an 8-time All-Star for the Twins in the 60s and 70s. Buck O'Neil played for the KC Monarchs, and he was the first African-American coach in Major League Baseball history. Minnie Minoso, who won 3 Gold Gloves, 13-time All-Star, and over 2,000 hits. Jim Catt, who played 25 years, 16 Gold Gloves, and a 3.45 career ERA, with 3.41 FIP. And also Gil Hodges, who's obviously notable, mostly for his years with the Dodgers, first baseman, 370 career home runs, and he also was manager of the 1969 World Series Mets.
Yep, that is your 2022 induction class. A lot of big names on there. Andrew, Minnie Minoso, as you said, Gil Hodges, all of them are notable, as if they weren't, they wouldn't be going to Cooperstown. So congratulations to everyone that got inducted. Now, besides the induction, there are still a lot of big names on this ballot going into 2023. Some of those names include Scott Rolen, Todd Helton, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Gary Sheffield, Alex Rodriguez, Jeff Kent, Manny Ramirez, Omar Vizquel, Andy Pettit, Bobby Abreu, Mark Burley, and Torrey Hunter, all of which who had very impressive careers. A lot of guys that we saw towards the tail end of their careers. Nevertheless, they were still very exciting to watch. And some of them definitely can make a case for making it into Cooperstown. Some of them definitely make a case as to why they shouldn't be. But Andrew, who do you think belongs in the Hall of Fame out of that list that I just read off?
Well, obviously, the obvious one, everybody knows, probably the greatest baseball player of all time, Barry Bonds. Everybody knows the reason why. It's PEDs. He also wasn't a great guy to know media. But when you look at the stats, most home runs ever, 7 MVPs, some insane stats, some of them just like 609 OPS in one single season. That's insane. 49% of his career hits were extra base hits. But it's been a long debate. I mean, I think people have heard enough about it, but Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, and I think he will eventually. But what do you think?
Andrew, I definitely agree with you. As I said in the beginning of the show, I believe him and Clemens should make it into the Hall of Fame because the mission statement for the Cooperstown says it all. In the mission statement, they want to preserve the history of baseball, and what Bonds, especially Bonds, no discredit to Clemens, he has the most Cy Youngs of all time, but Barry Bonds is the home run king, steroids or not. You have to acknowledge that. That is a major record in Major League Baseball. And by just letting him just go by the wayside, letting him fall off after 10 years on the ballot, it just doesn't do the correct justice to everything that he accomplished in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, exactly. Like what you said. Like they have stuff of him obviously in the museum, but they don't have an actual plaque.
Exactly. It doesn't do the justice.
Yeah, exactly. Roger Clemens too, obviously. We didn't talk about him, but he won 7 Cy Youngs, the most ever. So he deserves to be in also. But those two guys, it's just, I don't know.
It's tough. It's definitely tough. You look at the cheating, they put them in. Are they condoning cheating? If they don't put them in, then they're neglecting history. So it's definitely a very tough subject to come up with. Bonds and Clemens, of course, have fallen off the ballot. But before we wrap up our Hall of Fame segment,
one more thing.
Andrew and I are. Go ahead, Andrew.
Like we mentioned how he's a bad guy, Bonds. He cheated, but there's.
I wouldn't call him a bad guy. It's just you look at Ortiz. We just said he's mending his image. Bonds hasn't really done the work that Ortiz has done to be that image.
Yeah, but like there's guys who are not great guys that are in the Hall of Fame, like Ty Cobb.
Yeah.
Look at some of the stuff he's done, and I don't know.
I mean, you can name off a bunch of guys that, you can name off a bunch of guys that shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because of things they did off the field. But Bonds and Clemens, at the end of the day, Bonds and Clemens need to be in the Hall of Fame in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So now before we wrap up this Hall of Fame segment, Andrew, who's a guy that you see that is still on the ballot for 2023 that gets that Cooperstown call, whether it be next year or in the years to come?
The guy I think who's on the ballot right now, who should have been, in my opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer, is Billy Wagner. I don't get 7-time All-Star, 1-time reliever of the year, obviously overshadowed, played in the same era as Mo. But the stats.
And Trevor Hoffman, too.
Yeah, Trevor Hoffman. The stats say it all. 2.31 ERA, 900 innings, 11.9 Ks per nine. That's the best ever of players who've thrown at least 900 innings. His ERA, it's right. His ERA is right next to Mo. Mo had a 2.21. Wagner was 2.31. Played 16 seasons or 400 saves, but only 51% of the vote. And one of the reasons for that is probably the low innings total. Didn't reach 1,000 innings, and also he never really had postseason success over a 10 ERA in about 10 innings pitched. But when you look at this guy, just look at his stats. I don't get how he's not a Hall of Famer.
I 100% agree with you there, Andrew. Billy Wagner, like you said, overshadowed by two of the greatest relief pitchers of all time, not in the Hall of Fame yet, 6th all time in saves at 422. I mean, Andrew, this guy has to get in eventually. I'm shocked that he is still flirting around the 50% mark. As you said, 51 in last year's total. I mean, we need to see a jump. This guy was incredible. He was good for a very long time. He had that 5-year prime, 5 to 6 year prime that most voters look for, but he also excelled towards the end of his career as well. I find it very baffling that he's not in yet, and I hope we see him in there soon.
Absolutely. Now, who's the guy that you think should be in the Hall of Fame? Seth Stillman.
Now, my guy, after reading off that list, it was tough to narrow it down to just one. I see a lot of deserving guys on there. But one guy that I've really taken a particular closer look at over the last few years, because I watched him when he was at the tail end of his career. As we mentioned, a lot of these guys that are on the ballot, we saw at the tail end of their careers. I didn't realize how impressive this guy is. His resume, it speaks volumes. And that guy is Scott Rolen, third baseman for the Philadelphia Phillies, St. Louis Cardinals, the Cincinnati Reds. Scott Rolen, just unbelievable. 2,077 hits, 316 home runs, and an 855 career OPS, which is very respectable, especially for someone who wasn't known to swing the bat. Rolen, he wasn't known for the bat at all. He was an elite defender, probably one of the better ones that we've seen. He was a 7-time All-Star, 1997 NL Rookie of the Year. He won 1 Silver Slugger in 2002, but he had 8 Gold Gloves. 8. That is a long time to lock down at any position and be consistently at the top of the fielders. Not even forget the hitting, as we said, forget that. To be the best defender at third base for that long is incredible, and it deserves a lot of acknowledgement. And now those hitting stats, they just pad how good of a defensive player he was. He also won a World Series in 2006 with the Cardinals. And this year he received 63.2% of the vote, which was a jump from last year. So he's making strides as the years go on. I believe he is on year 5 or 6. So he has some time. He's about 4 or 5 years left in that 10-year gap of eligibility. So I can definitely see a possible induction, maybe even next year. It really depends. We'll break down the ballot of first timers in a little bit. But with the names that are coming on next year, I think you got to show some love to Rolen. Hopefully get him up to 70, and then the next year get him in. But Scott Rolen, he deserves to be in there without a doubt.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. Scott Rolen, for a guy who played third base, wasn't even known for his bat. Was a 8-time Gold Glover. He had 11 seasons with over an 800 OPS, 4 with a 900 plus. The stats, they say it all.
They do. They like I said in the beginning, they speak volumes. They really do.
14 seasons with defensive runs saved, average 14 defensive runs saved per year for the last 9 years of his career.
I mean, that's something we don't really even see that much now. Now, granted, there are a lot of good fielders, but 14 defensive runs saved is a very undervalued stat. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's like Andrelton Simmons level.
It is.
Somewhat near it.
It really is. Like we said, there's not that many guys that put up numbers like that. So Scott Rolen, Billy Wagner, they definitely need to get enshrined, whether it be next year, the year after. Get these guys in the Hall of Fame. They dominated their era. Even if they weren't the best player at their position, they definitely have the numbers and the resumes to back it up. So before we switch gears into our second segment, we're going to read off some of the first timers on the 2023 ballot. A lot of guys that, Andrew, you and I watched a good bulk of their career. So here we go. Let's read off some names for the first ballot guys in 2023. So Andre Ethier, outfielder for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Carlos Beltran, switch hitting outfielder with a lot of thump off the bat, played for multiple teams in a very long career. We'll get into his situation in just a moment. Steven Drew, former Yankee. Joaquin Benoit, very solid relief pitcher for the Tigers and the Padres. Houston Street, another very good relief pitcher for the Padres and for the Angels and Rockies. Joe Blanton. Adam Lind, left-handed thumper off the bench later in his career, first baseman primarily for the Toronto Blue Jays. Jonathan Broxton, Big Brock, 6'7", big frame, big relief pitcher. He threw gas, really fun to watch. Glenn Perkins, left-handed closing pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. Here's a good one. Chad Qualls. Chad Qualls found his way onto the ballot. Good for him. And the grilled cheese, Jason Grilli. Now, Andrew, I honestly, watching all of these guys growing up, they definitely had some good moments. And If they didn't have good moments, they wouldn't be on here. But I don't see any of these guys making it in their first year, and I definitely don't see a majority of these guys making it past year one.
Yeah, no, I mean, next year, pretty bad class. Not Beltran, I would like to predict gets the most votes of any of them, but at this point, we don't even know how many years he's going to stay on the ballot. Probably maybe.
Yeah,
20%.
like I was saying, that's a tricky situation, Andrew.
Yeah.
Everything circulating in his last year. With the Houston Astros, goes out on top, wins a ring, gets tied up in the scandal, and not just tied up, but it was reported back a couple years ago that he was one of the main guys driving forces in that scheme. So his Hall of Fame case is definitely in jeopardy just for that. But nevertheless, great player, another former Yankee on there. But I think he stays on the ballot. I think he's the only guy that stays on the ballot. But I just don't see him getting in.
Yeah, just to mention another few names, Jared Weaver, also Jacoby Ellsbury. Just guys, it's not
guys with good years, just not, they weren't good for long enough.
Yeah, obviously Jacoby Ellsbury had that one legendary 2013 year, but
and then made a lot of money after it, and that was pretty much it.
Not a career worth getting.